Right before we jump into this video, if you haven't signed up for the FroKnowsPhoto email list, just look for this orange box over on the website, put your name, email address in it, hit send it, and I will send you a free guide to capturing motion in low light situations. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. Welcome back to another rapid fire critique where I take 10 of your best images and give them a critiquerson. Now, I do want to let you know that I'm in here on Labor Day when everybody else is off from work because I want to make sure that we have this out and we get a jump start on the week. Now, before I jump into the images, I will be doing a back to school sale in a matter of like 2 weeks, but I do want to let you know that the code is currently active to get 43% off any of my video guides. If you go to FroKnowsPhoto.com/guides and you go to checkout for any of them, use the code BTS19 and you will get 43% off. Now let's jump into this. We have a critique of Spencer Stewart's images. So we've got this image right here. Let's just look at this. We've got sports. Jumping into the first image, first thing I'm going to do is see what he's shooting with. This is a Nikon D500 with a 70-200 2.8, so you're going to get the equivalent of like 105 to 300 on a DX camera. Shooting at 2.8, 70 millimeters, let's see, 1/1250th of a second at 3200 ISO. First things first, I like the composition of this, but the reason I like it most likely is because it's cropped. Now, I know people yell at me, don't stop yelling about cropping. Personal preference and all, as we know, but look at this. When you zoom in on here, just look at how prevalent the noise and grain structure is. Why? Because when you crop an image and you're shooting at 3200 with a crop sensor camera, you're going to introduce more noise. Now, this doesn't really bother me that much that there's some noise there. That's not a big deal. I'd rather see a frozen image than an image blur out because you didn't have a fast enough shutter speed. Just try to work on the not cropping part. But it's good framing here anyway, so if this was cropped, just learn from this crop right here. So I think that's a pretty good image. Let's jump over to the next shot. Let's see, same set, let's see, f2.8, 1/640th of a second, 3200 ISO. So yeah, slower shutter speed, didn't have to bring it as far back in post. You see how there's less noise and grain in the face here? It's a much cleaner image than the last one. By the way, I don't worry about this background noise. That's normal. That is called film grain. Well, it's not really film grain because it's digital, but you get the point. Don't worry about the background and don't worry about the noise so much. But do you see this? Do you see how there's much more noise? It's more prevalent in this image than in this one. Probably because this one was either exposed properly and didn't see, you see it's 1/640th because the guy's standing still, but same settings. The other one probably had to be compensated for. Not a big fan of the shot. It's just a guy standing there, doesn't really serve much of a purpose. I can't see the school's name on the front, whether that matters or not, or the number. It's just a pretty boring shot as it pertains to sports because he's just standing there. He's not excited. He's not making any kind of just anything that makes it interesting. So I don't like that shot. The exposure and everything is fine, but I don't like it for those reasons. Now we've got a running shot, D500, 70-200, 2.8, 1/1000th of a second at 2500 ISO, zoomed out to 135, so closer to 180 something. This is a good shot. The guy's running right into the light right here. You got him fully off the ground. The light looks great right on him. 1/1000th is fine for freezing the action. 2500, there is a lot of noise in this. I'm really curious if it's because of crop or not, because it's perfect composition. And not to rip on the photographer or anything, you don't always get perfect composition unless you do crop from time to time. Now I'm curious, this looks great. So I'm not too worried about the noise on it. The color looks fine. So all in all, I'm pretty happy with the results for this. Also, as I keep saying, I don't care about noise and grain as much if you're not cropping. When you crop, it draws it out more. It makes it more noticeable, and that seems to be what a lot of amateurs and hobbyists out there worry about, is there's too much noise. I rather see a frozen image that's sharp with more grain than a blurry image that's not usable with less grain because you didn't have a fast enough ISO. Now, I broke out the pen for this because let's look at these settings. This was taken before the other pictures that we've already seen. This is done with a 5D Mark III full frame camera, 150 to 500, assuming it's a Tamron lens, f6.3, 340 millimeters, 1/8,000th of a second is the top shutter speed of that camera at 5,000 freaking ISO. We're talking about 5,000 freaking ISO for an outdoor baseball game? Yeah, that doesn't compute. I'm not sure why you were at 5,000 ISO. I broke out the pen and the iPad here. Let's write this down. We've got, the eraser tool. We got 1/8,000th of a second at 6.3 at 5,000 ISO. Now I'm breaking out the iPad here to draw out the exposure to try and show you what the exposure could have been that's not 5,000. Because 5,000 is asinine outside. I get that it's an f6.3 lens, but you're stuck with that. So we're not changing that. 6.3 is going to stay here because that's 0 stops, by the way. That's what that means. That's 0 stops of light. Let's play with this. Let's get the shutter speed slower because 1/4000th is going to freeze the action. 1/2000th is going to freeze the action. That's 2 stops of light. We're taking no stops from here. We want 2 stops of light from 5,000. 1 stop, let's have it, gives you 2,500 ISO. Again, 1,250 or 1,250 ISO is going to give us the same exact exposure that we're looking at. So I took 2 stops of light. Well, I didn't take 2 stops. We underexposed based off of 5,000 to 1/2000th. Actually, that's going to overexpose. Sorry. Let me reiterate. Let me explain that. 1/8000th of a second is super fast. The slower the shutter speed, the more light you're letting in. So at 1/2000th of a second, if we left this at 5,000 ISO, it would be completely overexposed, meaning the image would be super bright. You get all those blinkies on the screen if you're seeing for clipped highlights. So we're compensating. We take 2 stops of light from the shutter speed to 1/2000th of a second. Then we go from 5,000 ISO to 2,500 to 12,500. Do you see how we built that? We're going to get the same exact exposure. Now, in terms of the image, it's fine. It's a good action shot. I mean, it's fine, especially with the super deep background 335 feet away at f6.3. It still blows out a little bit, but I don't understand why we're at 5,000 ISO. So make sure you really don't need to be at 5,000 ISO outside unless it's dusk or later in the day, and this doesn't look later in the day. I mean, it's hard to say whether it's later. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it was later in the day. We have plenty of light to work with, knowing that the shutter speed was 1/8000th of a second at 5,000 ISO. So build the shutter. This is how we're doing it. That's how we're building that exposure to get a different one. Same thing here. We're at 1/5000th of a second at 8,000 ISO. It's just freaking insane. So it's not the same exact because we're at 1/5000th of a shutter speed at oh, Jesus. Wait a second. Holy Jesus. I just saw something. Let me see this. Holy shit. Never mind. So it's reversed. We've got a shutter speed of 1/5000th of a second at 8,000 ISO to shoot a batter. What is wrong here? Why does this not make any sense? Why would you be doing this outside? Why do you need 1/5000th? I get at 1/5000th of a second you want to freeze the action, but holy shit, you're going to freeze the action at 1/4000th of a second. But oh my God. I get that at f6.3 you need some light, but whew, I'm going to write this one down also. 1/5000th of a second, 6.3 doesn't matter in this case, 8,000 ISO. We go to 4,000 ISO, we're at 1/2500th of a second. You're still freezing it. At 2,000 ISO, we do this again, what is that? 1/2500th is 1/1250th of a second. You're still going to freeze the action, or even if you want to go to 1/2000th of a second, you go to 1/2000th of a second at 2,500 ISO at 6.3, you're going to do the exact same thing. Just look at you don't want to shoot at 8,000 ISO with just about any of those consumer cameras, even though the 5D Mark III was a pro camera, it still is a pro camera. 8,000 ISO on that camera is not supposed to be used, especially outside. Whoa, that was insane. Now we're looking at a little better. ISO 500, shutter speed of 1/1600th of a second at 6.3, much better. But in terms of an action shot, I mean, it's not an action shot, it's Boise State, because we can see it right here. It's nothing extremely special. It's a snapshot of a guy about to do something. This is where, let's see, what are you zoomed out to on this one? You're zoomed out to 483 millimeters at now you're at the timer on 150 to 600. Wow. So in this case, you're better off going vertical and pulling back to say 300 millimeters, getting more of the subject in there. Or in this case, if he's lined up across from somebody on the field, because he's isolated right here, but he's too isolated. If he's lined up across the line because he wants to come in and try to sack somebody, though he doesn't look like a offensive lineman, or he could be a tight end, not a tight end, a defensive back or something. Show some of the foreground. Go vertical on this so that you can get some of the people out of focus in the foreground that's going to draw you into this subject and you get some sense of the game. In this case, I have zero sense of the game. This could be warm-ups, and it doesn't really matter because there's nothing going on in the shot. In terms of everything else, it's fine. Exposure's fine. The image is fine. Let me cut in here real quick and say if you'd like to take better pictures in only 11 days, well, I created a free mini video course that you can sign up for right now over at FroKnowsPhoto.com/11 days. Now, let's get back to the video. Now, this is much better. It's a super tight shot. Let's see, 5.6, 1/1600th of a second, 3200 ISO, so it's probably a little later. Look, I can get away with that at 5.6 because you're trying to freeze the action. This is a good action shot. The background, even at 6.3, is out of focus, which is nice. You've got the tackle trying to be made right here. Actually, he's cutting through the hole. Doesn't look like anybody's getting him. This guy's already on his ass, and I'm not sure why. This guy is blocking up front, and it looks good. He's probably holding this guy. Actually, he can't be holding him because he's got two hands right here. He can't be holding him, so no harm, no foul. But that's a very good shot. Nice job right there. Indoors shooting, what do we call this stuff? Swimming. 200 millimeters zoomed out, so 300 millimeter equivalent. 1/1250th of a second at 3200 ISO. Like, this is fine at 2.8. Trying to freeze the action of the swimmer. Swimming shots are very difficult. I really don't have a lot of input on what could make this even better. If you could shoot straight on, maybe, but you may not have opportunity to stand in that area. From the side of the pool, that's fine. Look, swimming shots are swimming shots. You get the guy coming right out of the water or the girl coming out of the water. You get the water coming over their head. There's really not much that's interesting about them. Leave some, if you shoot swimming and you have some ideas for what makes a great swimming shot, please leave them down below. I would love to see them, and I'd love to hear about them because I'm really not sure what to do to make those even better in this situation. Now we're outside. We're back to the D500, 300 millimeter f2.8. This person looks to be a college photographer, which means they may have gear for him to use, which would be awesome, by the way. That's one of the perks of school. ISO 100, because we're getting 1/1600th of a second for golf is fine. Yeah. I mean, even in this situation, let's go to the next page right here. Even in this situation, let's draw this out. 1/1600th of a second, 2.8 ISO 100. Outdoors, bright daylight, D500, I'd rather see a faster shutter speed outside in this situation, being that you're only at 100 ISO. But do you see the difference that a 2.8 makes? Let's draw the math out because I like this. Let's say we're going to go to 5.6, which we really don't want. We're not going to because you have a 2.8. But I just want to point this out for anybody with a 70 to 300, 55 to 200, any of those 150 to 600s or 150 to 500s that go out to 5.6 or 6.3. 2.8 to 4 is one stop, and then 4 to 5.6 is two stops. So we just went darker by two stops because this is 2.8. As you close down, going to a higher number, you're closing off the amount of light coming in. So we took away 2 stops of light. If we took away 2 stops of light from the shutter speed, we'd be at 1/800th of a second and then 1/400th of a second, which could still work, but there's no reason to do that at 100 ISO. So let's scroll that off. We want to stay at 1/1600th of a second. We need 2 stops of light. This is easy math, but I know it's confusing at first for some people. 2 stops. We go to 100 to 200, and then 200 to 400 gives us our 2 stops of light. The same exact exposure that's on the screen right now is going to be the same exact exposure if you shot it with a 5.6 lens at this same exact settings. We did it. We got 2 stops of light from here darker, then we added the stops of light back with the ISO. So there we go. I'd rather build it out that way than show you anything else. All right, so good shot right there. It's nice. You've got the flag in there so you know where he's aiming for. He just chipped the ball. It's up in the air. It's above his head. You got him nice and what am I going to say? Focused. And I would like to see it more boomy. That's me, but good job on that shot. This shot from the bunker is okay. I mean, you got the ball and you got the dirt flying, which is always nice. It's not a great angle, but that's not your fault if you can't go on the course in certain areas. For bunker shots, I like to get in front of the bunker if possible. I understand during match play it's not possible, but is it practice? Texas UT men's golf team competes in Red Hawk Invitational. So no, they're competing. So you have to watch where you are so you're not distracting the player. In practice, it's a little more easy. So this is good. This is probably his putter right here, and then he's chipping it out of there. I want to see more contrast. It's lacking contrast. We're at 2.8, 300 millimeters, 1/1250th of a second at 100 ISO. Same as I said before. Outside, I'd rather be at like 1/4000th, 1/2500th. 1/3200th of a second for golf. You'll freeze the shit out of it, and there's nothing to worry about at 400 ISO opposed to 100 outdoors for this. I just want to see more contrast, make that go boomify, and it'll be much better. Look at this. Right off the bat, we can tell you that this is going to be a lower ISO. It's not cropped because it's less grainy. So now we're at 2500 ISO, 1/1250th of a second. I can get away with that. I can live with that inside because you want to freeze that motion. You could go to 1/1000th of a second and probably do the same thing at, say, 2000 ISO, but the difference between 2000 and 2500 is going to be perfectly fine. It's going to be the same. So good job here. I like the action that was captured because you have the defender, you have the guy going up. Generally speaking, I would not be using a 70 to 200 to shoot up close with basketball. A 24 to 70, especially a 17 to 55 on a crop sensor camera would be a better option for getting action going to the hole, but this is a great shot because you've got the action going to the hole with a defender on him. The guy's going up for the shot. Background isn't terribly too distracting. I like this. Nice job. Moving on to this golf guy. Oh, it's Ricky Fowler, tees off at the hole 9-8 of the Fort Worth Invitational. Well, that's a professional. Now, this one throws me off. We are at 1/640, stop being on the eraser, 1/640th, f9, ISO 500. I'm kind of confused as why we're at f9. You have a 5.6 lens, why are we not at 5.6? You should be shooting this wide open, just for the fact that you want to get less distractions in the background. Now, of course, this isn't very distracting because it's trees, but you could obliterate them more. I do like, though, now that I say it, that everything is in focus from front to back, except for his hands are burnt in. There's some exposure issues going on here. I'm not really sure if the exposure was just really off and you brought back the highlights because it's just a weird discoloration and a weird vignette that's happening up here that isn't happening over here. It shouldn't. There's something wrong with the color on this. It's a 5D. You just should not be at f9. Really, even at 5.6, I would think that the club would still be in focus. So I would just be looking at, I don't even know if I'm going to build this out, but 5.6. So we opened up, we let more light in at 5.6, which means we went from 9 to 5.6 is basically 5.6 to f8. So it's a little over a stop. So right here, you could be like 1/1250th of a second. Or if you leave that at 1/640th, this could be at 250 ISO or 320, and it would still work. The f9 is what throws me off on this one more than anything. What did we have here? 5.6 now, ISO 500, well, it's the same thing, and he went to 1250. So basically what I just said about the exposure is exactly what happened right here. And look how much better the background is at 5.6 than at f9. It just looks better, I guess. But there's something weird about the face. I don't know if its focus was off or what, or it's cropped. It may be a cropped image again because it should be sharper than that on his face. But it's a good image. It's nice because you've isolated this subject. Now, this is the last shot here. We're at 5.6, 1/8000th of a second at 8000 ISO. Are you kidding me? Jesus, man. I'm not upset at you, by the way, because you're getting great shots. The coolest thing is that these shots are very good. The easy part is that. I mean, the hard part is getting the right shot. The easy part is teaching you about exposure, which you're right about exposure, but then thinking about smarter and better exposure. I don't know what the hell you're doing at 8,000 ISO. And lots of noise reduction gets added to the images. There's just no reason to be at 1/8000th of a second, 5.6, 8,000 freaking ISO. So we'll stay at 5.6, so we're not going to get any stops there, but Jesus. So let's take one stop at a time. 4,000 ISO. Then we have this to 1/4000th of a second. Even that would be better, but Jesus, why are we at... So let's go to 2,000. Hey, what happened there? Get off of my screen. 2,000. 1/2000th of a second at 5.6. Call it a day right there. And if you wanted to really do this, 2,500 at 1/3200th of a second should be perfectly fine. But there's no reason you should be shooting outdoors at 4,000 ISO or higher if you have this much light. If you have this much light. Okay, I'm laboring here on Labor Day. So I wanted to break out the iPad this time to draw out the exposures to really teach a little more. I love the teaching aspect of building the exposure. I hope this is helpful. I'd love to see your comments about the settings, and is this helpful for me to go ahead and do this exposure stuff, drawing it out on the iPad. Let me know what you think about these images. Give your critique down below, but remember, a critique is meant to be it doesn't always have to be positive, but leave it with some positives. Hey, I like what you did here, but maybe consider doing X if it's possible. That's how you do a critique. If you'd like to submit your best 10 images, go to bit.ly/FroKritiques. You can submit the 10 images right there, but keep in mind, I get thousands of those, so I may not ever get to yours, but it may happen. That's where I'm going to leave it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.